By the book tells a deceptively simple story. A new librarian in training, Emily, arrives for her first day at a quiet library, expecting a typical orientation but instead finding an environment charged with self-discovery, intellectual intimacy, and emotional connection. The established librarian, Laura, takes Emily under her wing, guiding her through both the literal books that fill the space and the figurative chapters of self-understanding that come from being seen and accepted. Beneath the playful, tongue-in-cheek setup lies a thoughtful meditation on how queer mentorship, female solidarity, and hidden spaces of learning have always served as havens for women who exist outside the traditional boundaries of love and desire. The library here is both setting and metaphor, a repository of knowledge but also of secrets, a place where what is forbidden in public might be explored in private by those brave enough to turn the page. At its surface, By the Book plays with a familiar trope, the new arrival learning from the seasoned guide. In lesbian narratives, this dynamic often appears as the experienced woman helping another navigate the complexity of identity, attraction, and authenticity. Laura represents confidence and self-possession. She knows who she is. She has created her own sanctuary within a world that still marginalizes women's autonomy, and she welcomes Emily not just as a trainee, but as someone who deserves access to hidden knowledge. Emily, in contrast, embodies curiosity mixed with naivety, the woman who is just beginning to understand herself and is unsure where she belongs. This dynamic between them mirrors the intergenerational queer experience, where those who have already navigated shame, secrecy, and discovery gently guide those who are just beginning their own journeys. For lesbian viewers, the scene of Emily arriving at a seemingly empty library can feel metaphorically familiar. Many queer women know what it's like to search for others like them and initially find only silence. The empty library, at first, represents the perceived loneliness of queerness, the fear that one is the only person who feels this way, that there's no community to turn to. Yet, as Emily wanders, she begins to notice traces of other lives, other voices, the books themselves. In LGBTQ history, literature has always been a refuge and a guide. Before same-sex love could be openly represented in film or media, it was books, often coded, hidden, or banned, that allowed queer people to find themselves reflected in the written word. Emily's discovery of spicy books in this quiet, dimly lit space symbolizes that moment of recognition, the sudden realization that desire, once thought to be unnameable, actually has language, history, and precedent. When Laura appears, she functions as both a literal character and a symbolic figure. She is the gatekeeper to knowledge and the embodiment of a freer, more self-assured form of womanhood. Her flirty confidence and calm demeanor are not merely traits. They represent a level of self-acceptance that Emily and many women aspire to. Laura doesn't apologize for who she is. She closes the library for orientation, not out of secrecy, but to create a space of safety and focus. In a world where women, especially queer women, are constantly observed, judged, or reduced to stereotypes, Laura's decision to control her environment is an act of autonomy. She carves out a space where the rules are hers, where learning can happen without fear. This resonates deeply within LGBTQ culture, which has long relied on private, protected spaces, bars, cafes, libraries, community centers, where people could be themselves away from society's gaze. Women in general, regardless of sexuality, can relate to Emily's initial mixture of curiosity and hesitation. The process of learning how to be comfortable in one's body, one's career, and one's voice is universal. Many women enter professional or social spaces feeling they must suppress parts of themselves to be taken seriously, to be proper, or to be liked. The film playfully subverts that expectation by making the library, a place associated with quiet restraint, into a setting of liberation. Instead of teaching Emily to follow rigid rules, Laura teaches her to trust intuition, to listen to her curiosity, to read between the lines. This mentorship speaks to the broader feminist principle of women empowering each other, not through hierarchy, but through shared experience. The question of why society resists seeing two women in love ties into a deep cultural discomfort with female autonomy and intimacy. Historically, women's relationships with each other were expected to be platonic and supportive, but not passionate or self-sufficient. The idea that women might fulfill one another emotionally, intellectually, and physically without needing men undermines patriarchal structures that rely on women defining themselves in relation to men. This is why lesbian love stories have often been censored, sensationalized, or trivialized. When two women connect, they create a world that does not revolve around male desire or approval. Even in a playful story like By the Book, the image of two women alone in a closed library, learning, laughing, discovering together, can unsettle those accustomed to seeing women as objects of someone else's narrative, rather than agents of their own. For lesbian viewers, the emotional truth of By the Book is not about explicitness, but about recognition. The scene of mentorship and mutual curiosity echoes real experiences of finding another woman who not only understands, but validates one's desires. Many queer women remember the first time they encountered someone like Laura, someone comfortable in her skin, who opened a door that had previously been locked. This library becomes symbolic of that moment, a place of discovery, a threshold between ignorance and self-awareness. The books Laura introduces are not just texts but metaphors for the multiplicity of ways women can know and express themselves. Chapter 4, playfully referenced, stands in for the stages of learning and unlearning that every woman experiences, the unlearning of shame, the learning of acceptance, and the writing of one's own story. From a broader feminist lens, By the Book critiques the cultural expectation that women's education should stop at intellect, excluding emotion and sensuality. The traditional library symbolizes order, silence, and control, values historically imposed on women to make them seem proper. But when Laura closes the library doors, she symbolically rejects those limitations. She turns the library into a space of embodiment rather than suppression. For centuries, women's knowledge was compartmentalized, intellect belonged to the mind, desire to the body, and spirituality somewhere in between. By the Book reunites these elements by showing that knowledge can be both cerebral and sensory, that learning about oneself is as valid as learning about literature. The film's humor and tone also reflect an important trend in modern LGBTQ representation, the normalization of queer joy. Rather than framing queerness as a tragedy or a moral dilemma, By the Book treats it with lightness and warmth. The playfulness between Laura and Emily, the whimsical premise, and the gentle teasing all contribute to an atmosphere of comfort. This tone matters. For too long, queer women's stories were either hidden or portrayed as doomed. Comedy and affection humanize these relationships, showing that lesbian and bisexual women experience the same awkward, funny, and tender moments as anyone else. Representation that includes laughter is radical because it reframes queerness as not just tolerable, but joyful, ordinary, and human. The relationship between the two women also represents a subtle reimagining of mentorship itself. In patriarchal contexts, mentorship often implies hierarchy, a senior figure imparting knowledge to a subordinate. But here, learning is mutual. Laura may guide Emily, but she also listens to her, responds to her curiosity, and allows the encounter to unfold naturally. This reciprocity reflects a queer ethos of relational equality. Queer love and mentorship often resist rigid power structures, instead valuing dialogue, empathy, and shared vulnerability. Laura teaches by example, not authority, which aligns with feminist pedagogical ideals that prioritize collaboration over dominance. For all women, By the Book offers a metaphor about reclaiming narrative agency. The title itself suggests both adherence to rules by the book and the act of writing one's own story. The film plays with this duality, asking viewers to consider which books women are supposed to follow and which they might write themselves. In patriarchal society, women have long been expected to live by the book of tradition, modesty, and obedience. But Laura's playful rewriting of the library's rules demonstrates liberation. She is literally and figuratively rewriting what the book means. Emily's willingness to learn, explore, and question symbolizes a new generation of women who no longer feel bound to those outdated instructions. Ultimately, By the Book is about the power of curiosity, connection, and courage between women. It uses humor and intimacy to convey profound truths about self-discovery and companionship. The library setting reminds us that knowledge, whether about literature or about oneself, is something to be shared, not hoarded. And by centering two women who meet, learn, and embrace authenticity within that space, the film contributes to a lineage of queer storytelling that celebrates liberation through learning. It tells lesbian viewers that their curiosity is sacred, their love is valid, and their stories deserve to be read aloud, not hidden between the lines. And for all women, it whispers the same message that echoes from every page Laura shows Emily. The moment you allow yourself to turn the page, you begin to live a story that is entirely your own.